Cameras flashed as Dr. Jamal Washington, billionaire tech CEO, stepped off the private jet. Hours earlier, flight attendants had refused him his pre-ordered meal while serving white passengers. Now, standing beside him, the entire airline crew faced the unemployment line, but that wasn't his victory at all. Before we dive into this shocking story of discrimination at 30,000 feet, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever experienced unfair treatment while traveling. Let's explore how one denied meal changed an entire industry. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Chicago skyline as Dr. Jamal Washington reviewed the quarterly projections for QuantumSphere, the tech empire he had built from nothing but determination and brilliant innovation. At 45, Jamal had become accustomed to the weight of responsibility that came with being one of the few black CEOs in Silicon Valley. But he never let it diminish his passion for creating technology that could change the world. Born to a single mother in South Chicago, Jamal had defied every statistic and stereotype. His mother, a night shift nurse, had sacrificed everything to nurture his early aptitude for mathematics and computer science. When he earned a full scholarship to MIT, professors had mistaken him for janitorial staff on his first day. When he graduated at the top of his class, recruitment officers assumed he benefited from affirmative action rather than recognizing his groundbreaking thesis on quantum computing applications. 20 years later, QuantumSphere employed over 5,000 people globally and was valued at $12 billion. Despite his success, Jamal maintained the same principles that guided him from the beginning: excellence without excuses, innovation without boundaries, and opportunity without prejudice. His company boasted one of the most diverse workforces in tech, not because of quotas, but because Jamal recognized talent in places others wouldn't bother to look. Dr. Washington, his executive assistant Devin called from the doorway. "The maintenance team just called about your jet." Jamal looked up from his tablet. "Don't tell me there's another delay." Devin grimaced. "Worse. They found an issue with one of the engine components. They're grounding it for at least 48 hours. Jamal leaned back in his chair, calculating the implications. "And we need to be in San Francisco by tomorrow morning for the merger talks with Tanaka Technologies. The Japanese investors are only in town for 2 days, Devin confirmed. "Rescheduling isn't an option if we want this deal to go through." The Tanaka partnership wasn't just another business deal. It represented the culmination of years of research, potentially making quantum computing accessible to universities and smaller businesses worldwide. Beyond the profit margins, this merger aligned perfectly with Jamal's vision of democratizing advanced technology. "Book me on the next commercial flight," Jamal decided. "First class on Apex Airlines if possible. They have the most direct route to SFO." Devin nodded, already typing on his tablet. "Any special requests for the flight?" "The usual meal arrangement. My doctor still has me on that specialized diet for my hypertension and blood sugar." Jamal had been managing these health conditions quietly for years, careful not to show any weakness in an industry that already scrutinized his every move more closely than his white counterparts. Within the hour, Devin confirmed the booking on Apex Airlines' premium first-class service, complete with the special meal request properly documented in the reservation. The flight would depart at 4 in the afternoon, giving Jamal just enough time to review the merger documents and prepare his presentation. As he packed his briefcase with the confidential prospectus, Jamal ran through his mental checklist for the meeting. The Tanaka team was conservative and traditional, valuing personal relationships as much as technical specifications. Arriving refreshed and prepared would be crucial for establishing the right impression. "Cars waiting downstairs whenever you're ready," Devin announced. "I've sent all the flight details to your phone, and your hotel is confirmed for 3 nights. Jamal nodded, slipping his laptop into its case. "What would I do without you, Devin?" "Probably miss half your meetings and forget to eat." Devin smiled. "Good luck tomorrow. The entire research division is buzzing about this merger." As the town car pulled away from the QuantumSphere headquarters, Jamal gazed at the gleaming glass tower that housed his life's work. From a small garage startup to this, sometimes he still couldn't believe his own journey. Tomorrow's meeting could take everything to the next level, opening doors for innovations that could revolutionize medicine, climate science, and artificial intelligence. The driver navigated smoothly through Chicago traffic toward O'Hare International Airport. Jamal used the time to send a few final emails and check the latest market reports. Everything was aligning perfectly for tomorrow's presentation. All he needed now was a smooth flight to San Francisco and a good night's rest. Little did he know that his carefully planned journey was about to become a national headline for reasons that had nothing to do with quantum computing or billion-dollar mergers. O'Hare International Airport hummed with the controlled chaos typical of a Tuesday afternoon. Jamal opted for comfort over appearance, wearing dark jeans, a gray hoodie, and his favorite worn leather sneakers instead of his usual tailored suit. After all, he would have plenty of time to change before tomorrow's meeting, and the 6-hour flight called for practicality. The decision to dress casually would prove consequential in ways he couldn't have anticipated. At the Apex Airlines premium check-in counter, Jamal presented his ID and confirmation number to a blonde attendant, whose smile faltered slightly as she looked up from her computer. "I'll need to see your boarding pass and ID again, sir," she said, despite having already scanned both. "Is there a problem?" Jamal asked calmly, accustomed to these extra verifications that somehow always seemed necessary when he traveled. "Just routine," she replied without meeting his eyes. "It looks like you've been selected for additional screening as well." Despite his platinum status with the airline, a result of countless business trips across the globe, Jamal found himself directed to a longer line while watching several white passengers with the same status breeze through the expedited lane. At the TSA checkpoint, the random selection process somehow selected him for a complete pat-down search and bag inspection. As the agent rummaged through his carefully packed briefcase, Jamal overheard 2 security personnel talking nearby. "Probably used someone else's credit card for that first-class ticket," one murmured to the other. "You know how they do." Jamal's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. 20 years as a black man in corporate America had taught him when to pick his battles. Today wasn't the day for confrontation, not with the Tanaka meeting looming. After clearing security, Jamal headed to the first-class lounge, where the receptionist eyed his casual attire with undisguised suspicion. "First-class passengers only," she stated flatly as he approached. "I am in first class," Jamal replied, presenting his boarding pass. The receptionist inspected it with exaggerated thoroughness before reluctantly allowing him entry, her expression suggesting she'd granted him a special favor rather than a service he'd paid for. Inside the lounge, Jamal found a quiet corner to review his presentation. The minutes ticked by without the customary offer of refreshments that he noticed being extended to other guests. When he approached the bar himself, the attendant seemed surprised by his drink knowledge and pronunciation of the single malt scotch he ordered. When priority boarding was announced for Apex Flight 1142 to San Francisco, Jamal gathered his belongings and headed to the gate. The gate agent checked his boarding pass twice, then directed him to stand aside as other first-class passengers boarded. "We need to verify something with your ticket," she explained vaguely. "It'll just take a moment." That moment stretched until nearly all priority passengers had boarded. Only after Jamal calmly but firmly inquired about the delay was he finally permitted to proceed down the jetway. Aboard the Boeing 787, flight attendant Cassandra Thompson immediately intercepted him at the entrance to the first-class cabin. "I think you might be in the wrong section," she suggested with a tight smile. "Economy boarding is not for another 20 minutes. Jamal wordlessly presented his boarding pass. Cassandra's eyes widened slightly before her expression reset to professional neutrality. "Oh, well, 2A is on your right." As Jamal stowed his carry-on in the overhead compartment, another flight attendant approached. "Sir, would you mind moving to the back of first class? We have a couple traveling together who would prefer those front seats." Jamal glanced at his boarding pass. "I specifically selected this seat when booking. If the couple wanted to sit together, they could have done the same." The head flight attendant, a tall man with graying temples and a name tag reading Richard Kensington, inserted himself into the conversation. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone carrying an edge of authority. "No problem," Jamal replied evenly. "I was just explaining that I'd like to keep my assigned seat." Richard's gaze traveled from Jamal's hoodie to his sneakers, a quick but unmistakable assessment. "We try to accommodate all our premium passengers' requests. Perhaps another seat would be more suitable." The implication hung in the air. More suitable for whom? "I'm comfortable right here, thank you," Jamal responded, his voice pleasant but firm as he took his seat. He noticed several white passengers watching the exchange with varying expressions: discomfort, indifference, and in a few cases, the knowing glance of recognition. Not of Jamal Washington, the CEO, but of the familiar spectacle of a black man, being asked to justify his presence in a premium space. As boarding continued, Jamal discreetly took out his phone and opened his notes app, documenting the interactions with timestamps and names. Years of experiencing subtle discrimination had taught him the value of contemporaneous records. A middle-aged white man in an expensive suit took the seat beside him, briefly nodding before immersing himself in his laptop. The man's boarding had been seamless, his presence in first class apparently requiring no explanation or verification. From his window seat, Jamal watched the ground crew loading luggage and catering supplies. Somewhere in the cargo hold was the special meal he had requested, a low-sodium, diabetic-friendly option that would help him maintain his energy levels for tomorrow's crucial meeting. As the final passengers boarded and the cabin doors closed, Jamal settled in for what he hoped would be an uneventful flight to San Francisco. The merger documents awaited his review, and he needed to arrive focused and prepared. Instead, the next 6 hours would become a masterclass in the persistence of prejudice, even at 30,000 feet. The Apex Airlines Boeing 787 climbed smoothly through the cloud layer, leaving Chicago's sprawling cityscape behind. As the seatbelt sign dinged off, the first-class cabin came alive with activity. Flight attendants emerged from the galley with warm towels and welcoming smiles for most passengers. When Richard Kensington reached Jamal's row, the warm towel service became perfunctory, the customary greeting conspicuously absent. The contrast was subtle but unmistakable. "Drink service will begin shortly," Richard announced to the cabin, his voice professional and pleasant. True to his word, Cassandra appeared moments later with a silver tray of champagne flutes. She worked her way methodically through the cabin, offering beverages with practiced charm to each passenger, until she reached Jamal. "Water?" she asked curtly, bypassing the champagne offering altogether. "Sparkling water with lime, please," Jamal specified politely. Cassandra's smile tightened. "We might be out of lime. I'll check." She returned with plain still water, no lime, no ice, in a plastic cup rather than the crystal glassware provided to other passengers. The businessman beside Jamal, whose name badge identified him as Tyler Bennett, CFO of a pharmaceutical company, glanced between Jamal's plastic cup and his own crystal flute with a flicker of confusion. 30 minutes into the flight, Richard moved through the cabin with a tablet, confirming special meal orders with passengers. "Mrs. Davidson, we have your lactose-free meal confirmed. Mr. Harrison, your kosher meal is prepared. Ms. Whitfield, your vegan selection is ready." When, Richard reached Jamal's row, he skipped over him entirely, continuing to the next passenger without acknowledgement. "Excuse me," Jamal said, his voice level. "I should have a special meal order as well. Low-sodium diabetic option." Richard consulted his tablet with exaggerated thoroughness. "I don't see any such order in our system." "It was confirmed with my booking," Jamal explained, opening his phone to show the reservation details. "My assistant received verification yesterday." Richard barely glanced at the screen. "Our galley inventory shows no special meal under your name. Perhaps there was a communication error when the order was placed. Have you ever been in a situation where you were treated differently than everyone around you?" Comment number 1. If you've experienced similar treatment while traveling, and hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves equal service regardless of appearance. What would you do if you were denied food on a long flight while watching everyone else eat? Let's see how Dr. Washington handles this mounting discrimination. As hot towels were distributed before the meal service, again, bypassing Jamal, the aroma of warming bread and seared protein filled the cabin. His stomach rumbled, reminding him that he'd skipped lunch to finish preparations for tomorrow's meeting. The meal service began with white linens draped over tray tables and drink preferences confirmed one final time. Cassandra and another flight attendant distributed appetizers throughout the cabin, fresh salads with balsamic vinaigrette for most passengers, a seafood option for others. Jamal's row was approached last. Tyler Bennett received his appetizer with a flourish and a wine pairing suggestion. When Cassandra reached Jamal, her expression shifted. "We don't appear to have an appetizer for you," she stated. "As Richard mentioned, your special meal request wasn't loaded." "I understand there might be confusion about my special request," Jamal replied calmly. "In that case, I'd be happy with the standard first-class meal option." Cassandra's lips pursed. "Those are pre-counted based on confirmed requests. We don't have extras." Jamal looked pointedly around the cabin, where every other first-class passenger was enjoying their appetizer. "Every other passenger seems to have been accommodated. The others had their orders properly submitted," she replied, the implication clear. Jamal had somehow failed to follow procedure. By the time the main course was served, the pattern was undeniable. White passengers received attentive service, detailed descriptions of their entrees, and solicitous inquiries about their satisfaction. When the service cart finally reached Jamal, Cassandra briskly informed him that they had, unfortunately, run out of all main course options. "We can offer you some peanuts or pretzels from the economy service," she suggested, as though proposing a reasonable alternative to a proper meal on a 6-hour flight. "I'd like to speak with the cabin manager," Jamal requested, his patience wearing thin not from anger but from genuine physical discomfort. His blood sugar was dropping, and the carefully managed balance of his medication required regular meals. Richard appeared promptly, his expression a practiced mask of professional concern that didn't reach his eyes. "Is there a problem, sir?" "Yes, there is," Jamal stated evenly. "I've been denied both my special meal and any alternative while every other passenger in this cabin has been served. I have documentation confirming my meal request was received and acknowledged by your airline." Richard glanced around, lowering his voice. "Sir, I understand you might feel entitled to special treatment, but we have procedures." "Entitled?" Jamal repeated, careful to keep his own voice measured despite the insulting implication. "I paid for the same first-class service as everyone else in this cabin." "Perhaps you should be grateful to be in first class at all," Richard replied, the veneer of professionalism slipping just enough to reveal the prejudice beneath. "We can provide some items from economy if you're that hungry." The comment hung in the air, breathtaking in its audacity. Beside him, Tyler Bennett shifted uncomfortably. "Excuse me," he interjected. "I couldn't help overhearing. This gentleman has been nothing but polite while receiving what appears to be deliberately inferior service. I've flown Apex for 20 years and never seen a paying first-class passenger denied a meal." Richard's expression hardened. "Sir, this doesn't concern you." "Actually, it does," Tyler countered. "As a frequent flyer, I'm concerned about witnessing discriminatory treatment." The word discriminatory caused Richard to flinch visibly. "That's a serious accusation." "It's an accurate observation," Tyler replied. As the confrontation unfolded, Jamal discreetly continued recording notes on his phone, documenting the exchange verbatim. The physical discomfort from his dropping blood sugar was becoming harder to ignore. A slight tremor in his hands, a cold sweat beginning at his temples. What started as a denied meal was rapidly escalating into something far more consequential. For Jamal, it was merely the latest chapter in a lifetime of similar experiences. For Apex Airlines, though they didn't yet realize it, it was about to become a defining moment in their corporate history. "I'll give you one more opportunity to provide the meal I paid for," Jamal stated calmly. "After that, we'll need to discuss appropriate compensation and formal documentation of this incident." Richard's posture stiffened. "Are you threatening me, sir?" "I'm informing you of the next steps in addressing a service failure," Jamal clarified. "Now, about that meal?" The power dynamic was shifting, though neither Richard nor Cassandra seemed to recognize the ground moving beneath their feet. Their expressions betrayed only annoyance at having to deal with a difficult passenger, not understanding that their actions were setting in motion consequences that would extend far beyond this flight. As the meal service concluded for other passengers, Jamal sat with an empty tray table, his hunger now a physical pain that threatened to undermine the focus he needed for tomorrow's meeting. But something else was growing alongside his discomfort, a quiet, implacable resolve. This wouldn't be another incident to silently endure. This time, there would be accountability. Do you think the flight crew realizes who they're mistreating? Comment number 2. If you believe they've made a massive mistake, they'll soon regret. Are you wondering what happens next when the truth about Dr. Washington's identity starts to emerge? The confrontation is just beginning. Cruising at 37,000 feet somewhere over Nebraska, Apex Airlines Flight 1142 maintained a smooth trajectory westward. Inside the first-class cabin, however, tensions were rising with each passing minute. 3 hours into the 6-hour journey, Jamal Washington's physical discomfort had progressed from annoying to concerning. The careful balance of medication for his hypertension and blood sugar required regular nutrition, a medical necessity rather than a mere preference. The slight tremor in his hands had worsened, and a dull headache pulsed behind his eyes. After carefully considering his options, Jamal pressed the call button above his seat. The light illuminated, but 5 minutes passed without response. He pressed it again. 10 minutes later, Cassandra Thompson finally appeared, her expression making clear that the summons was an unwelcome interruption. "Yes?" she asked, the single word carrying a weight of impatience. "I need to speak with the purser or lead flight. Attendant, please," Jamal requested, his voice steady despite his increasing discomfort. "Richard is busy with other passengers," Cassandra replied. "I can take a message." "This is a matter that requires his direct attention," Jamal insisted. "It concerns passenger safety and well-being." The mention of safety, a magic word in aviation, forced Cassandra's hand. With visible reluctance, she disappeared toward the galley. Minutes later, Richard Kensington approached, accompanied by a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, the air marshal assigned to the flight, though he wore no identifying badge. "This is Benjamin Harris, our onboard security officer," Richard introduced him, his tone carrying an unmistakable implication. "You mentioned a safety concern?" Jamal understood the tactic immediately. By bringing security, Richard was attempting to reframe Jamal's legitimate complaint as a disruption requiring containment. "My concern," Jamal began calmly, "is that I have been systematically denied the same service provided to every other passenger in this cabin, including the meal I specifically ordered and confirmed. This is causing me physical distress due to my medical condition, which requires regular nutrition." Benjamin shifted uncomfortably, clearly uncertain why he had been summoned for what appeared to be a service complaint rather than a security threat. "Sir, we've already explained that your special meal wasn't loaded," Richard stated, his tone suggesting the matter was closed. "If you continue to disrupt the flight with these accusations—" "What accusations?" Tyler Bennett interjected from the adjacent seat. "I've witnessed everything he's describing. This gentleman has been nothing but patient while receiving objectively inferior service." Richard's expression tightened. "Mr. Bennett, with all due respect," "With all due respect," Tyler countered. "I'm a diamond-level member with over 2 million miles on Apex, and I've never seen service this blatantly discriminatory. He's not being disruptive. He's requesting the basic service included in his ticket price." Other passengers were now openly watching the exchange. An older woman across the aisle removed her reading glasses, her gaze shifting between the flight attendants and Jamal with growing concern. Benjamin, the security officer, seemed increasingly uncomfortable with his role in the situation. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion in the galley," he suggested. "I'm quite comfortable having it right here," Jamal replied. "Transparency serves everyone's interests." Richard and Cassandra exchanged glances, recognizing the tactical error they'd made by confronting Jamal publicly. With a curt nod, Richard signaled Cassandra and Benjamin to follow him. The three huddled in the galley, occasionally glancing toward Jamal while engaged in intense discussion. During their absence, Tyler turned to Jamal. "I'm sorry you're experiencing this," he said quietly. "It's inexcusable." Unfortunately, it's not uncommon, Jamal replied, though usually not quite this blatant. Can I ask what you do? Tyler inquired. I'm in pharmaceuticals myself. Technology, Jamal answered simply, not yet ready to reveal his full identity. Years of experience had taught him that when documenting discrimination, it was sometimes advantageous to let events unfold naturally before disclosing his position. After several minutes, Cassandra returned alone, her demeanor noticeably altered. The hostility remained, but now it was layered with something else, calculation. Sir, she began with artificial brightness, we've been checking and it seems there might have been a mix-up with the meals. I believe we may have located your special order after all. Jamal raised an eyebrow. That's quite a coincidence. These things happen, Cassandra replied with a tight smile. However, since it's been in storage for several hours now, it doesn't look very appetizing. I wouldn't recommend it. I'd like to see it, please, Jamal requested. Cassandra's smile faltered. I really don't think... The meal, please, Jamal repeated firmly. With obvious reluctance, Cassandra retreated to the galley, returning moments later with a covered tray. She placed it before Jamal with exaggerated care. When he removed the cover, the reason for her hesitation became clear. The meal, a sad-looking rice dish with dried-out vegetables, appeared to have been deliberately left unrefrigerated. It had the distinct appearance of something that had been tampered with. As you can see, Cassandra said with false sympathy, it's not really edible now. Such a shame. I'll be the judge of that, Jamal replied, though he had no intention of eating food that might have been compromised. I'd like this meal documented as evidence of how my special request was handled. The word evidence caused Cassandra to stiffen. Evidence? I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Jamal stated calmly. I'm explicitly stating that I've documented a pattern of discriminatory treatment throughout this flight, culminating in the apparent tampering with my meal. Richard reappeared, his face flushed with barely contained anger. Sir, these accusations are becoming disruptive. If you continue, we may need to take more serious measures. What measures would those be? Jamal asked, his voice level. Restraining. A passenger who has done nothing but request the service he paid for. The older woman across the aisle had abandoned any pretense of not listening. Young man, she addressed Richard, I've been watching this whole situation unfold and I'm appalled. This gentleman has shown remarkable restraint while being treated. Abominably. Richard's gaze darted around the cabin, suddenly aware that multiple passengers were now openly watching and listening. The narrative he'd been constructing, of Jamal as a difficult, disruptive passenger, was collapsing under the weight of collective observation. Before he could respond, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting some turbulence ahead. The seatbelt sign has been turned on. Flight attendants, please secure the cabin and take your seats. The announcement provided Richard with a convenient escape from the confrontation. We'll have to continue this discussion later, he stated, the relief evident in his voice. Safety protocols take precedence. As Richard and Cassandra retreated to their jump seats, Jamal used the interruption to check his phone. The in-flight Wi-Fi was operational, allowing him to send a detailed message to his legal team and the Quantum Sphere board, outlining the situation and requesting specific actions upon his arrival in San Francisco. The physical symptoms from his lack of proper nutrition were intensifying, the headache now a steady throb, the tremor in his hands more pronounced, a cold sweat beading on his forehead. Tyler noticed his discomfort. Are you all right? He asked with genuine concern. I will be, Jamal replied, his determination hardening. But Apex Airlines might not be. 4 hours into the flight to San Francisco, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin had transformed. What began as isolated incidents of differential treatment had crystallized into an undeniable pattern, witnessed by increasingly uncomfortable passengers. The turbulence had passed, but the tension remained palpable. A young flight attendant named Zoe Chen, newly assigned to the first-class cabin after a crew rotation, approached Jamal's seat with a bottle of water. Unlike her colleagues, her expression held genuine concern rather than thinly veiled contempt. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the ambient hum of the engines. Jamal looked up, surprised by the simple courtesy that had been so conspicuously absent throughout the flight. "Some crackers or nuts would help," he replied. "I'm having some issues with my blood sugar." Zoe nodded with understanding. "Let me see what I can find." As she turned to leave, a flicker of recognition crossed her features. She paused, glancing back at Jamal with widened eyes. "I'm sorry," she said, "but aren't you Dr. Washington? From Quantum Sphere?" The question, spoken at normal volume, carried clearly to nearby passengers. Tyler Bennett, who had been working on his laptop, looked up sharply. "Washington?" he repeated. "Jamal Washington?" Jamal maintained his composure, though inwardly he noted the shifting dynamics. "Yes, that's correct." Zoe's expression transformed into one of mortified understanding. "I attended your keynote at the Global Tech Summit last year. Your speech about equitable access to quantum computing resources was incredible." "Thank you," Jamal replied simply. Zoe's professional demeanor briefly faltered. "I'm so sorry about— I just started this segment of the flight, but I'll get you those crackers right away." As she hurried toward the galley, Richard intercepted her, having overheard the exchange. Their conversation was just visible from Jamal's seat. Richard, speaking intensely, Zoe's posture becoming increasingly defensive. Even without hearing the words, the message was clear. Richard was reprimanding her for providing service to the passenger he had been deliberately neglecting. Meanwhile, Tyler Bennett had pulled out his phone and was rapidly searching online. "Quantum Sphere," he murmured. "The quantum computing pioneer. You're that Jamal Washington." The recognition was spreading through the cabin like ripples in still water. A passenger across the aisle was now openly searching Jamal's name on his tablet. Another was whispering to her seatmate while glancing in Jamal's direction. When Zoe returned with a packet of premium crackers and a fresh bottle of water, Richard followed closely behind her, his expression a strained attempt at professional pleasantness. "Dr. Washington," he began, the honorific he'd previously omitted, now emphasized, "I've just been informed of who you are. There seems to have been a misunderstanding with your service today." "Not a misunderstanding," Jamal corrected calmly. "A deliberate pattern of discriminatory treatment, documented from boarding through the present moment." Richard's smile froze. "I assure you, Apex Airlines does not discriminate against any passengers. Perhaps there were some service lapses." "Lapses?" Tyler interjected. "You deliberately denied him a meal while serving everyone else. You threatened him with security for making a legitimate complaint. You tried to intimidate that young lady for simply doing her job properly." Richard's face flushed. "Sir, you don't understand the complexities of in-flight service." "I understand the difference between poor service and targeted discrimination," Tyler replied. "I've witnessed enough today to testify to that difference if necessary." The word testify hung in the air like a storm cloud. Richard's expression flickered between anger and apprehension as he grasped the potential ramifications. Cassandra appeared at Richard's side, her usual confidence visibly shaken. "There's a message from the cockpit," she murmured. "They need to speak with you immediately." As Richard departed, Zoe seized the opportunity to speak quietly to Jamal. "I'm so sorry about how you've been treated, Dr. Washington. It's not the first time I've seen Richard behave this way toward certain passengers." "Not the first time?" Jamal repeated, his attention sharpening. Zoe glanced nervously over her shoulder. "There have been other incidents. Some flight attendants have even requested not to work with him because of how he treats passengers of poor color, especially in premium cabins." This information, suggesting a pattern rather than an isolated incident, was significant. Jamal made a mental note to include it in his documentation. "Thank you for your professionalism, Zoe," he said sincerely. "I appreciate you speaking up." In the galley, Richard and Cassandra were engaged in intense conversation with the purser and another crew member. Their agitated gestures and furtive glances toward Jamal suggested the realization of their predicament was beginning to dawn. Throughout the cabin, passengers were now openly researching Jamal Washington on their devices. The truth about who they had been witnessing being mistreated was spreading rapidly. Not just a first-class passenger, but the founder and CEO of one of the most innovative technology companies in the world, a billionaire philanthropist, and an influential voice in Silicon Valley. Tyler Bennett, having completed his own research, turned to Jamal with newfound respect. "I had no idea. Your work in quantum healthcare applications is revolutionary. My company has been following your research closely." "Thank you," Jamal replied, maintaining his focus on the documentation he was compiling. His physical discomfort remained, but the crackers and water had taken the edge off the most acute symptoms. Richard returned from the galley, his demeanor dramatically transformed. The contempt had been replaced by poorly concealed panic. "Dr. Washington," he began with exaggerated deference, "I want to personally apologize for any miscommunication earlier. We've located a suitable meal for you, and I'd like to offer you a complimentary beverage of your choice." "The time for that was 3 hours ago," Jamal replied evenly. "At this point, I'm more interested in documenting the complete sequence of events since boarding." Richard's smile faltered. "I'm sure there's no need for formal documentation. Apex Airlines values your business, and we'd be happy to offer you compensation in the form of travel vouchers." "I don't need vouchers," Jamal stated. "What I need is accountability." The word landed like a stone. Richard's professional veneer cracked further, revealing the fear beneath. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately?" "I think we've established that transparency serves everyone's interests," Jamal replied. From the cockpit, a new message was relayed to the crew. The aircraft's satellite communication system had received an urgent directive from Apex Airlines headquarters. The airline's executive team had somehow become aware of the situation unfolding on Flight 1142, likely through social media posts from passengers who had recognized Jamal and witnessed his treatment. As Richard was called away again, Zoe approached with a properly prepared meal tray. "I found this in the crew meals," she explained. "It's not exactly your special order, but it's low in sodium and should help with your blood sugar." "Thank you, Zoe," Jamal said, genuinely appreciative of her initiative. "I should warn you," she added in a lowered voice. "Richard and Cassandra are filling out incident reports claiming you were being disruptive. I heard them discussing how to justify their actions." This attempted narrative revision didn't surprise Jamal. It was a familiar tactic: reframe the victim as the aggressor, transform legitimate complaints into disruptive behavior. "Let them try," he replied calmly. "The truth has too many witnesses now." As he finally ate a proper meal, nearly 5 hours into a 6-hour flight, Jamal continued documenting every interaction, every statement, every witness. The evidence was overwhelming, the pattern undeniable. With each passing minute, the power dynamic aboard Flight 1142 continued its dramatic reversal. What began as 2 flight attendants exercising their perceived authority over a passenger they deemed unworthy of first-class service had transformed into a potential corporate crisis for Apex Airlines. And they were still an hour from landing. 5 hours into the 6-hour journey to San Francisco, the Boeing 787 began its gradual descent from cruising altitude. Inside the first-class cabin of Apex Airlines Flight 1142, an entirely different kind of descent was underway, one involving corporate reputations and professional futures. Despite the small meal Zoe had provided, Jamal Washington was experiencing intensifying physical symptoms. The delayed nutrition had disrupted his carefully managed health regimen, resulting in a persistent headache, slight dizziness, and the clammy discomfort of dysregulated blood sugar. He maintained his composure, but the physical toll was evident in the tightness around his eyes and the occasional tremor in his hands. Zoe Chen, noticing his discomfort during her regular cabin check, paused by his seat. "Dr. Washington, you're looking quite pale. Is there anything else I can get you?" "Some juice might help," Jamal replied quietly. "Something with natural sugar." Zoe nodded and hurried toward the economy cabin, returning minutes later with a small bottle of orange juice that she discreetly placed on his tray table. "Thank you," Jamal said, genuinely appreciative of her concern. "I had to get this from economy," Zoe explained in a lowered voice. "Richard is monitoring everything coming out of the first-class galley now." Before Jamal could respond, Kensington appeared at Zoe's shoulder, his expression thunderous. "Flight attendant Chen," he said, his tone clipped. "You're needed in the rear cabin now." Zoe hesitated, glancing between Richard and Jamal with obvious concern. "That's an order," Richard added, the threat in his voice barely concealed. "Timanki." Zoe reluctantly departed. Richard turned to Jamal with a strained attempt at professional courtesy. "Dr. Washington, I want to assure you that we're taking your concerns very seriously. Apex Airlines prides itself on exceptional service for all our premium passengers." "All of them?" Jamal asked pointedly. Richard's smile tightened. "Absolutely all of them. In fact, our CEO Patricia Winters has been notified of your presence on this flight and sends her personal regards. We'd like to offer you complimentary, first-class travel for your next 3 trips as a gesture of goodwill." The abrupt pivot from hostility to appeasement was as transparent as it was insincere. The mention of the CEO suggested panic had reached the executive level, likely through social media, where passengers had begun posting about the incident. Have you ever witnessed someone desperately backpedaling after realizing they've made a terrible mistake? Comment number 1 if you think Apex Airlines' attempts to make amends are too little, too late. Hit the like button if you believe accountability should come before apology. Do you think Dr. Washington should accept their last-minute offers of compensation, or is there a larger principle at stake here? The story takes an unexpected turn as we approach the landing. "Mr. Kensington," Jamal replied calmly, "I've documented systematic discriminatory treatment from the moment I boarded this aircraft. Vouchers don't address the fundamental issue." "I understand your frustration," Richard persisted, though his expression suggested otherwise. "Perhaps we could discuss an even more generous compensation package upon landing." Tyler Bennett, who had been silently observing the exchange, gave a subtle head shake. "They're trying to buy your silence," he murmured once Richard had moved away. "Classic damage control." "I'm familiar with the tactic," Jamal replied. "It might have worked if they'd simply forgotten my meal, but this was something else entirely." Through the cabin windows, the California coastline was becoming visible as the aircraft continued its descent. In the galley, the crew was engaged in urgent conversation, their gestures suggesting escalating concern. Zoe managed to return briefly to Jamal's seat under the pretense of collecting trash. "They're in full panic mode," she whispered. "The captain received a call from headquarters, and there are executives waiting at the gate. Richard's been writing up reports claiming you were aggressive and disruptive." "Let him try," Jamal replied. "There are too many witnesses to the truth." "That's not all," Zoe continued, her voice barely audible. "Richard has a history of similar incidents. 3 formal complaints were filed against him last quarter alone, all from passengers of color who were seated in premium cabins. The airline settled each case quietly. This information was significant, evidence of a pattern rather than an isolated incident." "Thank you for telling me this," Jamal said. "It matters." As Zoe moved away, Jamal noticed Cassandra Thompson watching their interaction with naked hostility. When their eyes met, she quickly looked away, busying herself with unnecessary cabin preparations. The aircraft's descent continued, the pilot announcing their approach to San Francisco International Airport. Throughout the cabin, passengers were powering down larger electronic devices and returning seats to their upright positions. Several were still glancing in Jamal's direction, some openly discussing the situation with their seatmates. Richard reappeared, this time with a document in hand. "Dr. Washington, I've prepared a brief incident report. If you could just review and sign it, confirming that any service issues have been satisfactorily resolved." Jamal accepted the document and read it carefully. The narrative it presented bore little resemblance to reality, describing minor service inconsistencies, promptly addressed by attentive staff, with no mention of the meal denial, security threats, or pattern of discriminatory treatment. "I won't be signing this," Jamal stated, returning the document. "It's a fiction." Richard's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing raw frustration. "Dr. Washington, we're trying to resolve this amicably. Surely we can find a mutually beneficial." "What would benefit me?" Jamal interrupted calmly. is accountability. What would benefit your airline is acknowledging the problem rather than attempting to cover it up. Before Richard could respond, his company phone chimed with an incoming message. Whatever it contained caused the color to drain from his face. Without another word, he retreated to the galley, where an intense discussion immediately ensued among the crew. Tyler Bennett leaned toward Jamal. "Something's happening." The energy just shifted. Indeed, the cabin crew's body language had changed dramatically. Urgent whispers, furtive glances, and the unmistakable atmosphere of damage control in progress. As the aircraft made its final approach to SFO, Jamal received a notification on his phone. A message from Devon, his executive assistant. Japanese investors and legal team standing by at terminal. Airport security briefed. Media presence growing. How do you want to proceed? The question required careful consideration. Jamal had never sought public attention for the discrimination he faced, preferring to address such matters privately and systematically. But this incident transcended personal affront. It represented a systemic issue that affected countless travelers who lacked his resources and platform. With precise keystrokes, he responded, "Standard protocol. No statements. Until meeting with legal. Maintain professional demeanor throughout." The aircraft touched down smoothly on the SFO runway, taxiing toward the terminal with the practiced precision of everyday routine. But for everyone aboard Flight 1142, particularly its crew, nothing about this arrival would be routine. As the seatbelt sign was switched off and passengers began gathering their belongings, an announcement came over the intercom, not from the usual flight attendant, but from the captain himself. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. We have a special procedure for deplaning today. All passengers are asked to remain seated until further instructions. Thank you for your cooperation." The unusual request prompted murmurs throughout the cabin. Richard and Cassandra exchanged alarmed glances, their earlier confidence now completely evaporated. Through his window, Jamal could see what the other passengers could not. A gathering of dark suits on the jetway, airline executives, airport security, and what appeared to be corporate legal counsel. Among them, he recognized Patricia Winters, the CEO of Apex Airlines, her expression grim as she consulted with her team. The landing had been smooth, but the arrival promised turbulence of an entirely different nature. "How far do you think this incident will escalate now that they've landed?" Comment number 2. If you believe Apex Airlines is about to face major consequences for their actions. Are you curious about how Dr. Washington will handle this situation when he steps off the plane? The confrontation is about to reach its climax. The Apex Airlines Boeing 787 sat at Gate C-12 of San Francisco International Airport, its engines powering down while inside. An unusual silence had descended upon the first-class cabin. Captain Reynolds' instruction for passengers to remain seated had created a palpable tension, broken only by the occasional ping of cell phones as people messaged loved ones about the mysterious delay. Through his window, Jamal Washington observed the growing assembly on the jetway. Apex Airlines executives in dark suits, airport security personnel, and several individuals whose bearings suggested legal representation. The airline was mobilizing its crisis management team, a response that confirmed the severity with which they now viewed the situation. Richard Kensington moved through the cabin with forced composure, though his rapid breathing and perspiration betrayed his anxiety. When he reached Jamal's row, his attempt at professional courtesy had an almost desperate quality. "Dr. Washington," he began, his voice carefully modulated. "Airline management has requested that you remain on board briefly after other passengers deplane. They'd like to speak with you privately." Jamal considered the request, immediately recognizing the strategy. A private conversation away from witnesses would allow the airline to control the narrative and potentially pressure him into a quiet settlement. "I'll be deplaning with the other passengers," he replied calmly. "Any discussions can take place in the terminal." Richard's smile tightened. "The airline is concerned about your privacy, Dr. Washington. A public conversation might attract unwanted attention." "My privacy wasn't a concern when you were publicly denying me service," Jamal observed. "I'll be deplaning with everyone else." Before Richard could respond, the cabin door was opened from the outside. Patricia Winters herself stepped aboard, her tailored suit and commanding presence immediately drawing all eyes. As the CEO of Apex Airlines, her personal intervention signaled the corporate recognition of a potential catastrophe. "Ladies and gentlemen," she addressed the cabin, her voice carrying the practiced authority of executive leadership. "I apologize for the brief delay in deplaning. We're experiencing some logistical issues with the jetway. Normal deplaning will begin momentarily. Thank you for your patience." It was a transparent excuse, but it provided cover for her real purpose. With practiced efficiency, she made her way directly to Jamal's seat, extending her hand. "Dr. Washington, I'm Patricia Winters, CEO of Apex Airlines. I'd like to personally apologize for any service issues you experienced today." Jamal accepted the handshake with professional courtesy. "Ms. Winters, I appreciate your concern, though I'm curious about the timing. The service issues, as you call them, began 5 hours ago." Patricia's expression remained carefully neutral. "I was only recently made aware of the situation. I'd like to invite you to our executive lounge to discuss appropriate remediation." "I have a meeting with investors, awaiting my arrival," Jamal replied. "Any discussions will need to take place as I proceed to my destination." A flash of frustration crossed Patricia's features before her professional mask resettled. "Of course. Perhaps we could walk together? I assure you, Apex Airlines takes customer service extremely seriously." "So I've been told repeatedly today," Jamal noted, though the evidence suggests otherwise. The cabin door reopened, and a flight attendant announced that deplaning could now begin. As first-class passengers rose to retrieve their belongings, many openly watched the interaction between Jamal and the CEO, some even recording discreetly on their phones. Tyler Bennett gathered his briefcase, turning to Jamal before departing. "Dr. Washington, it was an education sharing this flight with you. If you need a witness statement regarding today's events, please have your office contact me." He handed Jamal his business card with a firm nod. As passengers filed toward the exit, Richard and Cassandra positioned themselves near the door, their expressions a study in controlled panic. When Zoe Chen passed by, Richard grabbed her arm, whispering something that caused her face to pale. Jamal noted the interaction with concern. When it was his turn to deplane, Patricia Winters fell into step beside him. "We've arranged for a private exit to avoid any inconvenience," she explained, gesturing toward a service door where security personnel waited. "I'll be using the main terminal exit," Jamal stated firmly, "the same one used by every other passenger." Patricia's professional smile faltered slightly. "Dr. Washington, there's significant media presence in the terminal. We're concerned about potential misrepresentations of today's events." "Transparency doesn't allow for misrepresentation," Jamal replied as he continued walking toward the main exit. As they emerged from the jetway into the terminal, the situation became immediately clear. A small crowd had gathered, members of Jamal's executive team, the Japanese investors from Tanaka Technologies, airport security, and indeed, several journalists with cameras. Devon, Jamal's executive assistant, approached immediately. "Dr. Washington, are you all right? We've been receiving concerning reports from passengers." Before Jamal could respond, Patricia Winters interjected. "There was an unfortunate service lapse on today's flight. Apex Airlines is working directly with Dr. Washington to address it appropriately." "A service lapse?" echoed a voice from the crowd. Tyler Bennett, who had paused rather than continuing to his connection. "Is that what you call systematically denying service to a black passenger while providing it to everyone else?" The blunt characterization caused a ripple through the assembled onlookers. A journalist raised her phone, recording the exchange. Patricia's expression hardened. "Sir, you're mischaracterizing a complex situation." "I witnessed every moment of it," Tyler interrupted. "There was nothing complex about it. It was textbook discrimination, and when the crew realized who they were discriminating against, they panicked and tried to cover it up." Other passengers had stopped now, several nodding in agreement with Tyler's assessment. One woman stepped forward, the older passenger who had been seated across from Jamal. "I saw it too," she stated firmly. "It was appalling. They denied him food while serving everyone else, then threatened him when he politely asked for what he'd paid for." The narrative was slipping irretrievably from Apex Airlines' control. Patricia Winters attempted to regain command of the situation, signaling to her public relations director, who quickly approached. "Dr. Washington," Patricia said, her voice lowered. "I'd like to offer our most sincere apologies along with appropriate compensation. Perhaps we could discuss the terms privately." "This isn't about compensation, Ms. Winters," Jamal replied evenly. "It's about accountability and systemic change." The terminal doors opened again, and Zoe Chen emerged, her expression a mixture of distress and determination. She approached Jamal directly, ignoring the warning glances from Richard and Cassandra, who hovered nearby. "Dr. Washington," she said, her voice slightly tremulous but clear. "I've just been informed that my employment with Apex Airlines has been terminated, effective immediately. They're claiming I violated service protocols." Jamal's expression darkened. "For bringing me juice when I was experiencing medical symptoms?" "For interfering with the handling of a difficult passenger," Zoe clarified, the quotation marks evident in her tone. "The retaliation was as predictable as it was unethical. Punish the whistleblower, intimidate potential witnesses, control the narrative through fear. It was a strategy Jamal had observed throughout his career, though rarely executed so clumsily. "Ms. Chen," he said, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "I'd like you to meet Devin Parker, my executive assistant. Devin, please make sure Ms. Chen has my contact information. My legal team will be in touch regarding wrongful termination representation." The public offer of support shifted the dynamics yet again. Patricia Winters' expression transformed from controlled concern to barely concealed alarm as she realized the situation was escalating beyond conventional damage control. "That won't be necessary," she interjected quickly. "Ms. Chen, there's clearly been a misunderstanding regarding your employment status. We'll need to review the circumstances immediately." But the damage was done. The assembled journalists were capturing every word, every reaction. The story was no longer just about discrimination against a passenger. It now included corporate retaliation against an employee who had tried to do the right thing. As security personnel attempted to create space in the increasingly crowded terminal, a distinguished Japanese businessman approached, bowing respectfully to Jamal. "Dr. Washington," he greeted formally. "I am Hiroshi Tanaka. My team and I have been waiting for your arrival. Is everything all right?" The presence of the Japanese investors, the very reason for Jamal's trip to San Francisco, added yet another dimension to the unfolding drama. Hiroshi Tanaka's questioning gaze moved from Jamal to the airline executives, his expression revealing his assessment of the situation. Patricia Winters attempted damage control once more. "Mr. Tanaka, I apologize for any delay in Dr. Washington's arrival. We at Apex Airlines pride ourselves on denying service based on appearance," Tyler Bennett interjected. "On threatening passengers who request the meals they paid for? On firing employees who try to help them?" The blunt interruption caused several people to gasp, while others nodded in agreement. Airport security officers exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unsure how to manage the escalating situation. Jamal maintained his composure throughout, observing the rapidly deteriorating position of Apex Airlines with the calculated awareness of a chess master watching an opponent's inevitable defeat. He had not orchestrated this public exposure, had, in fact, initially sought only to document the discrimination privately, but now that events had unfolded in this manner, he recognized the potential for meaningful impact beyond his individual experience. With deliberate calmness, he addressed the assembled group. "I appreciate everyone's concern. At this point, I need to proceed to my scheduled meeting with Mr. Tanaka and his team. My legal representatives will be addressing today's incidents through appropriate channels." As he prepared to depart with the Japanese delegation, Richard Kensington made one final desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Dr. Washington," he called, his voice strained. "On behalf of the flight crew, I want to express our deepest regrets for any misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding, Mr. Kensington," Jamal replied, his voice firm but controlled. "There was deliberate discrimination, followed by attempted intimidation, followed by retaliation against an employee who showed basic human decency. Those aren't misunderstandings. Those are choices. The simple, direct assessment landed with devastating precision. Richard seemed to physically shrink under its weight, while Patricia Winter's expression confirmed she recognized the magnitude of the crisis facing her company. As Jamal departed with the Tanaka delegation and his own team, the terminal remained in turmoil. Passengers sharing their observations with journalists, airline executives huddled in urgent consultation, and airport officials attempting to restore normal operations. What had begun as routine discrimination against a passenger assumed to be unworthy of first-class service had transformed into a potential landmark case that threatened not only individual careers, but possibly the reputation of an entire airline. And the most significant developments were yet to come. By sunset, the incident aboard Apex Airlines Flight 1142 had transcended from an isolated case of discrimination to a full-blown corporate crisis. News vans lined the perimeter of Apex's regional headquarters in downtown San Francisco, while, inside, the company's executive team and crisis management specialists engaged in emergency strategy sessions. Patricia Winters paced the length of the boardroom, her earlier composure replaced by the barely contained energy of a CEO fighting for her company's survival. The preliminary damage assessment projected on the wall made for grim reading. Stock. Price down 8.4% and falling. Flying while black trending nationally. 67. Media inquiries in the past hour. Customer service flooded with cancellation requests. Multiple first-hand accounts from passengers being shared across social media. How did we miss who he was? Patricia demanded, addressing the question to no one in particular. How does Jamal Washington, one of the most successful tech CEOs in the country, get treated like this on our airline without anyone recognizing him? The airline's chief diversity officer, a recent hire who had yet to implement any substantive programs, cleared his throat. With respect, Ms. Winters, I think you're focusing on the wrong aspect of this situation. The problem isn't that we failed to recognize a VIP. The problem is that our staff discriminated against a passenger based on his appearance. Patricia's expression tightened. I'm well aware of the ethical dimensions, Thomas. I'm trying to understand how our processes failed so completely. The public relations director slid a tablet across the table. It's getting worse. Passenger videos are going viral. The one from Tyler Bennett, the pharmaceutical executive, has over 2 million views already. He's being hailed as an ally model for his intervention. On the screen, crystal-clear footage showed Richard Kensington threatening to have Jamal restrained for requesting his meal, followed by Tyler's calm but forceful defense. The unedited clip was damning in its simplicity. No context necessary, no explanation that could mitigate what was plainly visible. "Where are we with the settlement offer?" Patricia asked. The general counsel winced visibly. "Dr. Washington's legal team has declined our initial proposal. They're not interested in financial compensation or confidentiality agreements. They've requested a detailed plan for structural changes within Apex Airlines, including anti-bias training, transparent reporting mechanisms, and independent oversight." "That's not a settlement demand," Patricia observed. "That's a corporate restructuring." "Exactly," the lawyer confirmed. "They're not approaching this as an individual incident to be resolved, but as a systemic issue requiring comprehensive reform." Meanwhile, across the city in the penthouse suite of the Fairmont Hotel, Jamal Washington was concluding his meeting with Hiroshi Tanaka and the Japanese investment team. Despite the turbulent arrival and his still-present physical discomfort, Jamal had delivered a compelling presentation on Quantum Sphere's vision for democratizing quantum computing resources globally. "Dr. Washington," Hiroshi said as the formal presentation concluded, "your technology is impressive. Your composure today was even more so." Jamal looked up from his tablet. "I'm not sure I follow." Hiroshi's expression was thoughtful. "In Japan, we believe character is revealed not in moments of ease but in moments of challenge. Today we witnessed your response to significant provocation. You maintained dignity and principle without descending into vengeance. This speaks well of how you might lead a global partnership." The Japanese team exchanged nods of agreement. What might have derailed the negotiations had instead provided an unexpected window into Jamal's character and leadership style. "Thank you," Jamal replied simply. The incident today was unfortunately not unusual in my experience, though perhaps more blatant than most. "This is difficult for us to understand," Hiroshi admitted. "In Japan, customer service is sacred, particularly for distinguished business travelers." "America is complicated," Jamal acknowledged. "But I believe in addressing systems rather than symptoms. The flight attendants today were expressing something deeply embedded in our society. Firing them without addressing the underlying issues solves nothing." This perspective, focusing on structural change rather than individual punishment, resonated with the Japanese investors, whose business culture emphasized long-term thinking and systemic approaches. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and tentative agreements to proceed with the merger, Devon approached with an update on the developing situation with Apex Airlines. "They've suspended Richard Kensington and Cassandra Thompson pending investigation," he reported. "The social media response is overwhelming. Wired Quantum Dignity is trending alongside Triarif flying while black." Jamal nodded, unsurprised by the public reaction. "And Zoe Chen?" "The airline is backpedaling on her termination, claiming it was a misunderstanding. They've offered her reinstatement with an apology." "Has she accepted?" "No," Devon replied. "She's speaking with our legal team now. Apparently she has documentation of similar incidents over the past year, all involving Richard Kensington and all directed at passengers of color in premium cabins." This information confirmed what Jamal had suspected: the discrimination he experienced wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern that the airline had previously chosen to ignore or quietly settle. "Where are we with the media requests?" Jamal asked. "Over 300 and counting," Devon reported. "Everyone from local news to national morning shows. Our communications team is recommending a single statement rather than interviews, at least until we have a clearer picture of Apex's formal response." Jamal considered the recommendation. Throughout his career, he had generally avoided leveraging his personal experiences of discrimination for publicity. His focus had always been on creating change through excellence and example, rather than through public advocacy. This situation, however, presented a unique opportunity to address a widespread issue that affected countless travelers who lacked his resources and platform. The public nature of the incident, witnessed by multiple passengers and now millions online, made a private resolution impossible. "Draft a statement," he decided. "Focus on systemic issues rather than personal grievance. This isn't about me or even about Apex specifically. It's about patterns of discrimination that persist throughout customer service industries." As Devon departed to coordinate with the communications team, Jamal's phone lit up with a notification. A public statement had just been released by Apex Airlines. The carefully crafted corporate language announced a comprehensive review of service protocols and expressed deep concern over the reported incidents, while carefully avoiding any admission of discriminatory behavior. The statement concluded with a paragraph that caused Jamal to raise an eyebrow. "Apex Airlines has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. We are proud of our diverse workforce and inclusive culture. We are committed to ensuring that all passengers receive the premium service they deserve, regardless of background." The gap between this public commitment and Jamal's actual experience was so vast as to be almost darkly comical. More telling was the absence of any specific corrective actions or accountability measures, just vague assurances designed to manage public perception rather than address underlying issues. Across social media platforms, the corporate statement was being dissected and criticized for its emptiness. Competitors were seizing the opportunity, with Delta and United both releasing pointed statements about their own anti-discrimination training programs and diversity initiatives. By evening, what had begun as a denied meal on a single flight had escalated into a national conversation about race, privilege, and corporate responsibility. News segments featured interviews with other Black executives who shared similar experiences of being questioned or challenged in first-class cabins, business lounges, and other exclusive spaces. The incident was becoming a case study in how seemingly small acts of discrimination reflected and reinforced larger systemic inequities, and how corporations often failed to address these issues until forced by public pressure. In the Fairmont penthouse, Jamal reviewed the final draft of his own statement. Unlike Apex's defensive corporate language, his response was measured, forward-looking, and focused on constructive change rather than punishment. Today's incident aboard Apex Airlines Flight 1142 was not unique or isolated, it began. It reflects patterns experienced daily by travelers of color across America. Rather than focusing on individual blame, I am calling for systemic accountability and transparent reporting throughout the travel industry. The statement went on to outline specific reforms that would create measurable improvements, not just for VIP travelers who might be recognized, but for everyone. As he approved the final draft, Jamal reflected on the irony that his denied meal might ultimately nourish more significant progress than his quantum computing innovations. Technology could change capabilities, but only changed hearts and systems, could transform society. The next morning would bring new developments that would surprise both Apex Airlines and the public following the story. The corporate crisis was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would challenge conventional wisdom about accountability and reconciliation in the aftermath of public discrimination. 1 week after the incident aboard Apex Airlines Flight 1142, a press conference was scheduled in the grand ballroom of the San Francisco Marriott. Media speculation about the announcement had reached fever pitch, with most analysts predicting a landmark discrimination lawsuit against the airline. Financial experts had already calculated potential damages in the hundreds of millions, while Apex's stock had plummeted 23% since the incident. The ballroom was filled beyond capacity. Journalists from every major network, corporate representatives from the travel industry, diversity advocates, and curious onlookers. At precisely 10 o'clock, Jamal Washington stepped onto the stage, accompanied by Patricia Winters, CEO of Apex Airlines. Their joint appearance sent a ripple of surprise through the assembled crowd. Jamal approached the microphone first, his composed demeanor a stark contrast to the speculation and sensationalism that had surrounded the incident. "Good morning," he began. "Over the past week, millions of you have watched, read about, or discussed what happened to me on an Apex Airlines flight. Many have expressed outrage on my behalf. Others have shared similar experiences. Today I want to redirect that energy towards something constructive." He paused, scanning the room of expectant faces. "I could destroy Apex Airlines today. A lawsuit of this magnitude, with this much evidence and public support, would likely result in crippling financial penalties. But what would that accomplish? One company punished, headlines for a few days, and then we all move on until the next incident." The room had fallen completely silent, every person present sensing that they were witnessing something unexpected. "Instead," Jamal continued, "I'm announcing a different approach. Quantum Sphere and Apex Airlines are launching a partnership, the Dignity in Service Initiative. Rather than litigation, we're creating transformation." Patricia Winters stepped forward to join him at the microphone, her expression revealing both relief and determination. "What happened on Flight 1142 was inexcusable," she acknowledged directly. The first time the airline had admitted wrongdoing without qualification. It revealed failures not just in individual behavior, but in our corporate culture and systems. Rather than defending the indefensible, we're committing to fundamental change. The details of the initiative unfolded over the next 30 minutes. Quantum Sphere would develop comprehensive anti-bias training using virtual reality technology that allowed employees to experience subtle and overt discrimination from the recipient's perspective. Apex would implement the program company-wide, with mandatory participation from executives to frontline staff. More significantly, the airline committed to transparent quarterly reporting of customer service disparities, independent oversight from civil rights organizations, and structural changes to promotion and accountability systems. But transformation isn't just about policies, Jamal emphasized. It's about people. At his gesture, Zoe Chen walked onto the stage. The young flight attendant who had lost her job for showing basic humanity had become an unexpected symbol of moral courage in a difficult situation. Ms. Chen will be leading the implementation as our new Director of Service Equity, Jamal announced. Her first-hand understanding of frontline challenges will be invaluable in creating practical, effective reforms. The announcement drew spontaneous applause. Zoe stepped forward, her expression a mixture of determination and hope. "When I brought Dr. Washington that orange juice, I wasn't making a political statement," she said simply. "I was just doing what any decent person should do. That's all this initiative is really about, ensuring that decency isn't optional in customer service." As the formal presentation concluded and the question period began, the tone in the room had shifted noticeably. What many had expected to be an announcement of corporate punishment had instead become a blueprint for corporate transformation. When asked about Richard Kensington and Cassandra Thompson, the flight attendants whose actions had sparked the incident, Jamal's response was characteristically measured. "They've been removed from customer-facing roles, which is appropriate. But they've also been offered the opportunity to participate in developing our training program, to help others understand the impact of biased service. Punishment might satisfy our desire for justice, but it rarely creates lasting change. Education might." The approach was unorthodox, focusing on systemic reform rather than individual retribution. It reflected Jamal's long-standing philosophy that sustainable progress required structural change, not just symbolic penalties. As the press conference concluded, attention turned to the merger with Tanaka Technologies, the original purpose of Jamal's trip to San Francisco. Hiroshi Tanaka himself appeared on stage to announce that the partnership would proceed, with an expanded scope that included deploying quantum computing resources to analyze patterns of service disparity across multiple industries. "What impressed us most," Hiroshi stated, "was Dr. Washington's vision in transforming a personal injustice into institutional improvement. This is the kind of leadership that builds lasting value." In the months that followed, the Dignity and Service Initiative expanded beyond Apex Airlines to include hotel chains, rental car companies, and retail establishments. What began as a denied meal became a movement, with measurable improvements in customer service equity across participating organizations. For Jamal personally, the incident had taken a toll that wasn't visible in his public appearances. The physical symptoms he experienced during the flight had required medical attention upon arrival in San Francisco. The emotional weight of yet another discriminatory experience, added to a lifetime of similar incidents, had necessitated private time for recovery and reflection. Yet the outcome had brought unexpected healing as well. The initiative created a channel for constructive action, while the public response demonstrated that such treatment was increasingly viewed as unacceptable by the broader society. 1 year later, Jamal found himself boarding another Apex Airlines flight to San Francisco. The changes were immediately apparent, from the diverse staff at the check-in counter to the training badges worn by flight attendants, indicating completion of the anti-bias program. As he settled into his first-class seat, a flight attendant approached, an older black woman whose name tag identified her as Denise. "Dr. Washington," she greeted him with genuine warmth. "Thank you for your meal selection. I've confirmed it's prepared exactly to your specifications." "Thank you, Denise," he replied. "I also wanted to thank you personally," she added more quietly. "I've been flying for 27 years. What you did changed things for all of us, passengers and crew. We're not perfect yet, but we're better." As the aircraft lifted into the clear blue sky, Jamal reflected on the journey, not just from Chicago to San Francisco, but from discrimination to transformation. The most powerful response to injustice wasn't always destruction. Sometimes, it was creation, building something better from the ashes of difficult experiences. The merger with Tanaka Technologies had revolutionized accessibility to quantum computing resources, making previously elite technology available to smaller universities and businesses in underserved communities. Meanwhile, the Dignity and Service Initiative had been adopted by over 30 major corporations, creating measurable improvements in equitable treatment for travelers of all backgrounds. Richard Kensington and Cassandra Thompson had taken different paths following the incident. Richard had initially resisted participation in the training program, eventually leaving the industry altogether. Cassandra, surprisingly, had embraced the opportunity for education, eventually becoming an effective advocate within the company's internal reform efforts. Her personal transformation from skepticism to understanding demonstrated that change was possible, even from unlikely sources. Tyler Bennett had remained in contact, his pharmaceutical company partnering with QuantumSphere on healthcare accessibility initiatives. What began as a chance encounter in adjacent airplane seats had evolved into a productive alliance across industries. As for Zoe Chen, her courage had propelled her from entry-level flight attendant to a respected executive leading industry-wide reforms. Her insight that decency shouldn't be optional had become something of a mantra for the initiative, appearing on training materials and corporate pledges throughout the travel industry. The Apex incident had forced America to confront an uncomfortable truth, that discrimination didn't always announce itself with explicit slurs or denied service. Sometimes it manifested in subtle differences of treatment, accumulated indignities, that individually might be dismissed as misunderstandings, but collectively revealed undeniable patterns. The change wasn't perfect or complete. True transformation rarely happened overnight. But each time a passenger of color was treated with the same courtesy automatically extended to others, each time an employee felt empowered to do the right thing without fear of retaliation, the world became slightly more aligned with its highest ideals. Jamal opened his laptop to review the latest implementation data from the initiative. The metrics showed steady improvement. Fewer reported incidents, more diverse hiring at management levels, increased retention of minority employees who previously left positions due to hostile environments. Numbers told part of the story, but the human impact was equally significant. Thousands of personal testimonials had poured in from employees and customers alike, describing shifts in corporate cultures from fear and division toward inclusion and respect. As the flight attendants completed their safety demonstration, Jamal noticed something significant. He was being treated well, not because he was recognized as a VIP, nor because the crew feared repercussions, but because respectful service had become the new standard. The initiative's success wasn't measured by special treatment for the powerful, but by equal treatment for everyone. The true transformation wasn't just in policies or practices, but in perspectives. The denial of a meal had exposed deeper hungers in American society, for dignity, for fairness, for the simple acknowledgement of common humanity regardless of appearance or position. One meal denied had ultimately nourished thousands with something more sustaining than food. The demonstration that principled response to injustice could create positive change rather than merely punishing past wrongs. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, Jamal closed his eyes briefly, allowing himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The journey continued, both literally and metaphorically, with new challenges and opportunities ahead. But for now, it was enough to know that sometimes the highest form of success wasn't measured in personal victories, but in collective progress. This story of Dr. Jamal Washington reveals several powerful truths about confronting racism in modern America. First, discrimination often hides behind service failures rather than explicit bigotry, making it both pervasive and deniable. Second, true power comes not from retaliation, but from strategic transformation. Washington's approach of creating systemic change rather than pursuing punishment proved more effective in creating lasting impact. The narrative demonstrates how documentation and composure are essential tools when facing discrimination. By maintaining professional dignity while methodically recording every interaction, Washington transformed a personal injustice into institutional improvement. His story reminds us that the most sustainable response to racism isn't destruction, but creation, building better systems from the ashes of difficult experiences. Perhaps most importantly, this account illustrates how addressing root causes requires both accountability and education. By focusing on changing perspectives rather than merely punishing individuals, Washington created ripples of transformation across entire industries. His recognition that the highest form of success isn't measured in personal victories but in collective progress offers a blueprint for how individuals might respond to injustice in ways that heal rather than divide. Have you experienced or witnessed discrimination that made you feel powerless? Share your story in the comments below. If you believe in the power of transformative justice over mere punishment, hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories about overcoming adversity with dignity. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how racism operates in subtle ways. Awareness is the first step toward change. Thank you for joining this important conversation. May we all find the courage to transform our challenges into opportunities for collective healing and progress.